Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about my visit to the Paul Reed Smith SE factory in Indonesia. This was a very exclusive look. I was not restricted from anything. I was allowed to film everything, see everything, nothing blocked off. What the main thing to talk about is at Cort is the company and PT Cort is the factory in Indonesia. It's not one big factory like you think. I think you picture like a building the size of like 5 Costco's or 5 giant department stores. It's not like that. There are many different buildings, and the Paul Reed Smith factory is its own building. It's been that way for a while. So the only thing made in that building is the Paul Reed Smith SE guitars. There are 3 people at Paul Reed Smith who rotate from the US to there to go and just oversee things. And one of those people, which is my friend, Jack Higginbotham.
We come here, we shoot a sample, we agree that that's what it is we want. They literally nail it to the wall and use that as a reference for all the different stuff.
We're going to be talking about him and this factory a lot because he's a really big piece of the puzzle to understand what is happening that is truly unique. And I really believe that at this factory. And I also just want to say, they're not the only manufacturer at PT Cort that has their own building. There are other brands that have their own buildings as well. What makes it special is how PRS has basically brought over so much, not only I'll say technology, but mostly ideology. What I want to talk about is the 10 things I learned at the factory. First thing I want to tell you what I learned, probably I think the most important, how they interact with the employees there.
So this is Denny. Denny and Isaac and I. Good to see you. This is Philip. Denny. Nice to meet you.
You know, Jack is a personable person and I've known him for years, and it's just his personality. He remembers your name. He's quick to respond. He's just just a well-rounded, good human being. And when I was there for 2 days, everywhere I went, he was greeting people by their names and talking to them. That's something that only Jack can do. I just want to be honest about this.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Good. It's good to see you. How are you? Good to see you. You doing well?
Yes.
Awesome. Great to see you.
Jack is just that way. But what they did, which I thought was really cool, is they put pictures of all the employees with their names at their stations.
So what I want to ask you is that when you go to the station, not only is there the procedural thing, there's a picture of each employee, their name, and what they do essentially, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what is that idea? What is that?
So it's kind of like what we do in the US. You build a guitar, you sign the guitar, you've got that pride of ownership that you got to work on that guitar. So you and I obviously love this stuff. We're obsessed with it. This is what we decided we're going to do with our lives, you know? They don't necessarily feel that way, but it's like we push them in that direction and say, be proud of the work you're doing, because that guitar is important and the work that you're doing to that guitar is super important.
To just have that personal touch, to have that ability to say, hey, look, this is the person's name. I thought it was funny that the employees chose to do really funny pictures. You know, they posed. I won't show you exactly the pictures, obviously, but there was a lot of pictures of people throwing up, you know, like the peace sign or the rock sign, or, you know, posing with their hands like this, you know, just kind of giving some personality to the pose. That is very unique. The next thing I learned at the PRS SE factory was that they have really spent a lot of time doing something that is really easy to see for you guys. In other words, this isn't something that I'm going to blow you away with because you've seen it, but I think understanding how it happened. If you've looked at PRS SEs, especially, we know that for a while they made them at the World facility in Korea, which are very good guitars. However, in my personal opinion, I'm not going to argue better or worse quality of the guitars. I don't want to go there. I think that's a fight for the ages on the internet. What I do want to say is, without a doubt, the SEs being made now look so much like the core guitars in the vibrant coloring, in the depth of the tops, of the finishes. It is absolutely stunning to see.
Now, did you guys have to relearn this because of the veneers, how you do it? Or is it the same way as if you do it at a quarter-inch?
Same way. What's different, what he's doing is something that we taught, which is if you do, if you went back again 5 years, it was just sort of like wipe on, wipe off.
Right.
What we've learned here is to take a small area and not just put it on, but drive it in. So he's driving it in, and that's part of the trick.
Right.
When he's taking that second cloth, he's drying it off, but he's also driving it into the figure. So that depth that you see,
Right.
if you don't use the right solvent and you don't have the right technique, you could take a really beautiful veneer and turn it into meh.
Yeah.
Which is something that we feel strongly about. No matter where we make a guitar, you can draw out the beauty. If you use the right technique, she can draw out.
And now what's she doing?
She's going to do the back. The rest, much of the rest of that is going to come out in the tone process.
So let's talk about the third thing I learned. You could stain the guitar. However, the finish is going to then ruin the guitar. And I want to just use this analogy. Imagine if I took a beautiful color and I stained it on a piece of wood, and then I put a piece of glass over that. You would look through the glass and you would see this beautiful top. Now, what if I told you instead of the glass, I wanted you to look through the bottom of a Coke bottle? Be like, oh, it's blurry and I can't see it. I never thought about this until they explained it. That's kind of how finishes work. Clear finishes can distort how bright the finish underneath is. They can distort how clear and vibrant the detail of the wood is. You're losing something visually from the guitar with the clear coat finish. So getting the clear coat right is very important. So in other words, what I want to say is they're not just going, hey, what are you guys doing here? Sounds good, slap it on.
Because if you don't see it, if it doesn't pop, you're not going to go to it and pick it up and find out that it feels good. And that's going to make you want to plug it in and find out that it sounds good. But if you don't win the visual battle, you're not going to win the war.
That was another thing that tells me that, they've really leveled up the finishes, and that gets me excited to bring you on to number 4. PRS SE now is really focused to get the SE guitars as close to core, in other words, the guitars made in Maryland, as possible, and still have a difference between the two lines. Now, they don't want to dissuade anyone who might want to buy a $5,000 guitar. You don't want to damage your American factory, your legacy. You want to make sure that these two factories can run overseas and in the US symbiotically and work together and actually drive more customers to PRS and not just cannibalize the customers you have. So that is something they not only experiment with, but continue to experiment with, using my analogy that they're getting right up to the ledge where maybe 10 years ago, they were a foot from the ledge. 5 years ago, they were 6 inches from the ledge. I'm telling you right now, they're about 1.5 inches from the ledge on the side of just making it just like the core. What I mean by that is making sure that the knobs are correct, making sure that the tuner buttons look exactly like the core.
We're getting less and less shy to use the deeper PRS DNA in the SE line because it leads to a better PRS experience. It leads you to a place where you expect the PRS to be.
But this brings in the next thing that I learned that comes into this is the changes, the pickups that come from PSE. I know what you're thinking. They just use some cheap pickups, throw them in there, and then that's why when you get the guitars, even though the quality of the guitar seems good and the guitar looks right, obviously we explained, you have to upgrade these pickups. That's not true anymore. They not only are cloning pickups, versions of their USA pickups, they're creating new pickups. They're actually specifically creating a version of the pickup. Again, using that analogy right up to the ledge. Why make a guitar exactly like the USA guitar? Why not give them something, maybe they didn't like something about the USA guitar. They're taking the time to make the pickups correctly. What you're looking at right here is a machine that charges the magnets, and then notice that they insert them in these foam blocks to isolate them so that they're not being corrupted by being put next to each other.
It is as close as we can get it to US one. We've spec'd it out to be the same. All the deviation between the voicing in a USA NF53 and PSE is actually kind of post-processed.
Oh.
Yeah, so we actually matched these pickups with these guys' help. They're incredibly close, using different materials to a USA pickup, but we add a resistor at the pot to EQ it in a different way. That's why those two guitars sound a little bit different. The SE NF53 has a little more high end and a little more attack.
Right.
The USA one has this big, beautiful round sound.
Right.
Some people want more attack. Yeah. We did the same thing with the Silver Sky SE.
if you play a USA
Yeah.
Silver Sky, it's got this beautiful mastered single coil sound. It's very lush, but some people want to kind of cut through the mix.
Right.
So we put a little more edge on the SE version, which our artists often, depending on their music, prefer.
They're taking the time to make sure the pickups in the SEs are good quality pickups that a professional artist would be happy with and could play on stage or record an album with. They do not want the SEs to be these cannibalized guitars anymore that are just a good foundation. And if you upgrade these things, you'll get a core guitar or similar, more similar to the core guitar. They want this to be either on its own, a great guitar in its own merit, and not a comparative. In other words, it's not the lesser than the core. It's just different. It's slightly different in its own way, but not in the qualities. In the quality, it's going to be there. Number 6, attention to the detail of the quality of the wood. So what I mean by that is, you know, yes, are you going to get a 3-piece body versus a 2-piece or 1-piece body from the core? Of course, that's another way they're going to keep costs down.
Silver Sky, poplar. So poplar, people are like, ooh, you're using poplar, right? It's like, that's not cool. What was cool was we tested alder, poplar, 3 or 4 different woods, and we actually made the SE guitar prototypes and sent them to John. And we played them, kind of figured out what we liked, but weight-wise and tone-wise and consistency-wise, it wasn't money-wise, because a lot of people were like, oh, you're just using cheap poplar. It actually just worked better, sounded great. So we use a lot of poplar, and it's also, you're able to get poplar defect-free, so less waste.
Oh,
you know,
nice.
You're not carving into knots so much.
Right.
So it's a really friendly wood to work with.
What models have the poplar the most?
Silver Sky is predominant.
Silver Sky, okay, yeah.
And there will be more. There will be more over time.
You're going to see more necks made of maple because they've learned that the maple just is more durable, even though the maple is sourced from Canada and the US.
We're using maple because for this manufacturing process and at the rate at which you make guitars and the strength of ratio, a laminated maple neck is it's just the way to go from a building process. It's stronger, it's more stable, it just behaves better, especially with like a 25-inch scale and 24 fret neck, you know, a longer neck. It's just going to stay in tune better. It's going to be more of a stable platform.
And they go to great lengths to not only make sure they go through the sorting process to get the good wood like they do in the US, they're also making sure that they're kiln drying it.
We're in Indonesia. Wood is wood. Maple is maple. You've been to our factory and seen the oven that we do rosewood and the fingerboards in.
We use the same devices in the U.S. that we use here, just so we understand the language, because you know all meters are a little bit different. But this is a probe meter. There's also meters that you can just lay on the surface and it'll read it. But I like digging into the wood, and you can see it says low.
Right.
This thing won't read below 5%.
Oh, okay.
So when it says low, that means this thing is working great, because this is 4.5–4%. There's no water in this wood.
Right.
You don't get that water out here. It's going to happen in Arizona in the summertime, and it's going to shrink, and weird stuff's going to happen. So with maple, the maple fretboards go through about the same process as far as temperature and duration go.
Part of the deal with SE is they're making a lot of guitars, 500 a day, basically, out of that factory. That's a lot of guitars. And then still put in all of these processes that help guarantee that the foundation of the guitar is quality. Keep in mind, just like a foundation of the house, has to be great, the foundation of the guitar is the body and the neck, the wood. And so therefore that has to be great as well. So that is where another thing where I learned that they really spent a lot of time, which I was not expecting. I thought that it was going to be a lot faster process.
Because how much of this wood is for PRS? How much of this room is wood for PRS? What percentage do you think? Yeah, about 50–60% of it.
Oh, well, this is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
This is why I say that, because the more they kind of put this kind of in process to scrutinize each step, they're taking the potential to slow down hundreds of guitars from getting out the door. And that's very risky in today's climate when it's very expensive, when you really want to get the volume up. So this is a very cool thing to see in this factory, and I thought it was really cool. The seventh thing I learned at the factory, they really pay attention to the fretwork.
So this lady has been fretting for us for many years. She's amazing at this stuff. Obviously gluing in all of our frets. I usually come in, one thing that is kind of fun to check is just the viscosity of the glue that we're using, because there's a big barrel of this stuff.
Right.
And it'll stratify. So one of the things we do is make sure it's mixed up.
Oh.
It's like this weird obsession I have of like just making sure the glue stays nice and tacky. Because glue isn't really, you're not really gluing the fret in.
Right.
You're creating a mold around the tang of the fretboard is what you're, the
Right.
fret. So talk about geeky stuff. So a fret wire, everybody sees this, but people don't necessarily pay that much attention to what's going on down here. But you've got these teeth in the tang. The thing that goes in the wood is called tang. The thing we play is the bead. The tang is really important because it has these teeth and they sort of bite into the wood as it goes in and create a little wedge that then it will mechanically not want to pop out. But if you can imagine when you're pressing in a fret, you're creating kind of a slot, you know, for each one of those teeth going in. So we use glue in there because the fret gets pressed in, it creates a trough, the glue forms itself around that trough,
Right.
creates a mold and helps the fret to not pull out again. That's
Right.
why, so you're not really gluing in frets, you're creating a glue hole around the
Right.
teeth. We just made, these carriages are new. We changed the design since the last time I was here, and that's working pretty well, which helps the neck to not deflect so much.
Yeah, I see here they're like the cradles. Your cradles are especially.
Yeah, for each shape, we have a different thing so that it's made to the contour of the neck.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
N53,
Herman Li.
SE.
Yeah, and Slop Ash, Silver Sky. So everything's got its own little form seat to lay in. The more the neck deflects, think about that fret wire going in. It's like going in, and if the neck doesn't deflect much, that's good. If it bends a lot, you could just imagine the geometry of what you're doing to that wood.
Right.
It's creating more width. So we're super careful with making that fret slot just the right width. We're super careful with the fret wire that we have and making sure it's just right. You can mess it all up if you let the geometry go like this, and then you create a giant gap.
Right.
So the better you can support the back of the neck, the better your neck is going to seat and stay seated and not have, you know, strange fret pops happen.
Right. I like that everything has like a mold or a template.
Just thinking
Right,
about
like
the
this,
detail.
you know,
A holder.
Yes.
Ergonomic.
Yeah, that is
and
nice.
Practical.
Really nice.
We've really focused on this, making sure that every guitar is getting completely scratch-free and polished.
Now frets have been installed.
Yep.
They've been trimmed.
Yep.
They've been polished.
Yep.
Have been rounded. You know.
Yep.
And now the nut.
That's right.
At a level that I definitely recognize from the PRS Maryland facility. In other words, breaking down all of the quality into steps and then putting redundancies behind them.
If you watch what he's doing, he understands what the spec is. So he's measuring with the feeler gauge the resistance at the first fret.
Right.
So that tells us this depth was
Right.
cut correctly. This is unusual, all right? This is not normal. You talk about things that are different in our factories and other factories. That's your standard operating procedure. This is exactly what he's doing. This tells you first step, second step, third step. Third step is how you measure this thing to make sure it's right. And they go by these.
They're letting each worker stop and take the time to quality assurance their own work before they pass it along. So number 8. So now that we know that they're really paying attention to the fretwork and the fit and finish of the guitars, another cool thing that I learned, things are changing at PRS as a whole. Now this is a little gray area, and I just want to tell you this. I was privy to a conversation that I just want to share with you. And it's 2 conversations. I just want to tell you so you know. In 2009, I got to meet Paul Reed Smith at the factory for a special meeting, I should call it that. And I was there with a very select group of people. Obviously, I wasn't a YouTuber at that time. One of the conversations we had was about things PRS could do to improve the overall experience to the end user. And one of my suggestions was spending more time and effort on your website versus your catalogs. And Paul, his pushback to me at the time was his fear of educating his competitors. And I mean that in a, it sounds very Paul, but most importantly, it makes sense at the time. At the time, the industry was not sharing information. The YouTube, this YouTube, generation that we have now, where everybody's just on these platforms telling you every secret and every behind the scene things and everything, that was not an accepted practice, especially in the early 2000s yet. It just wasn't there. And so his concerns was, well, what do you teach and what don't you teach? Fast forward to 2025, I was talking to Jack at the facility, and I told Jack, one of the things I learned, which is why it's number 8, is this facility, the Paul Reed Smith SE facility, does not exist at all if Paul Reed Smith still was thinking like he was in 2009 when I talked to him. The man I met in 2009 would not let that facility happen today. To see them grow into this ideology that says, the consumer is best served if the guitar is the best. And the best way to do that is to make sure the people building it make the best product, even if those people are an extension of Paul Reed Smith and not actually a, Paul Reed Smith direct employee in their own facility in Maryland. It really shows that they really have decided that they want to educate as much as make great products. They want you to understand what they're doing. Number 9 takes us to another building. There's another building. Yes, PRS has its own building in Indonesia where they make 100% of the SE electric guitars, and no other guitars are made in that building. And those employees only make PRS SE guitars. I have verified that. There's another building though, and that's the amplifier building. And that's where they build all of the PRS amplifiers. In other words, there's a few amplifiers still being built in the US, the premium pieces here and there. However, the MT15, the Archon, Sunzera, stuff like that, that's going to be made at PT Cort, and that's exclusive, and this is the important part to understand. So this is what you need to know. All PRS SE electric solid body and semi-hollow guitars, 100% of them now are made at PT Cort and nowhere else. 100% of all imported PRS amplifiers are made at PT Cort. They make all the amplifiers. So if you're buying an amplifier, it's either made in Maryland in the US, which will come with a hefty price tag, or it's made at PT Cort. They had to help PT Cort understand exactly how they wanted these amps to build, set up the process to make these amplifiers fantastic and testing them to lengthy extents. They did so much to make the amps, perfect. It was crazy to see this, and it was really exciting. This brings me to the second thing. So I basically told you that all solid body PRS SE guitars and Cine Hollow are made at PT Cort in Indonesia, and all PRS amplifiers except for the high-end hand-wired stuff that's made in the US at the Maryland facility are made at PT Cort. So what PRS SE products are not made there? Well, it's easy enough, believe it or not. All other PRS SE products would be hollow body guitars and acoustics. That's what's left in the SE line. And that is made at a different facility called Cort Dalian, which is in China. So Cort is 100% the partnership. When I say partner, I mean they've agreed to work together. Partnership with PRS. So if you have a Paul Reed Smith product, whether it's an amplifier, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, solid body, semi-hollow, it's either made in Maryland or it's made by Cort, which is going to be in Indonesia or in China. Either way, it's one of the Cort facilities. That is a put your eggs all in one basket approach. One of the experiences that I'll be sharing with you is, of course, I spent quite a bit of time with Cort as well. And some of the things I can tell you when you see that video, Cort values this relationship with PRS. It comes across in everything they do and say. Not because PRS is their biggest customer or even the most guitars that they make out of that 1 million plus facility. In other words, all those buildings put together do over 1 million guitars a year. It's because of this relationship of, hey, let's work together and make the best product for the guitar player. And that comes across. And you hear that a lot. So that brings me to number 10. A PRS SE looks like a PRS because it is a PRS. Every detail of the new PRS SE guitars is scrutinized into the idea of how can this have the same DNA.
Whenever we have a quote unquote generic part on the guitar, it's beginning to really annoy us because all kind of built this whole business off of let's make a part that performs to the best of its ability. Right or wrong, you know, we think that our knobs are great and they're better. And why put a generic knob on when we could put our knob on? And it wasn't just here's how it looks, and here's how it feels. You know, there's a real reason behind every part that we use.
We can scrutinize that the finish on the on the Cort versions are going to be like a polyurethane base, where maybe the USA ones are going to be a nitro base.
We started out with pretty simple stain projects that we've done together. But then maybe 3 years ago, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, there's one of our posts is actually on Instagram of a pink, and then we put a blue on it, and it's how we got our violet.
All right, so what is that?
That is a wash coat. So it's a very light amber, but it's necessary to draw the next, it's like I said, complicated color. So
Yeah.
It's a multi-stage thing. You put down a little wash coat. Looks like you're just rubbing it with lacquer thinner or something.
Yeah.
But it's bringing the curl out.
Right.
And it gives you a little bit extra visual definition between the face screen and the curl. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it drives into it. Now when you put this on, it's a transitional color instead of just paint. Which is something that we feel strongly about. No matter where we make a guitar, you can draw out the beauty if you use the right technique.
And of course, the most obvious thing is the SEs are going to have scarf joints on the neck. The cores are going to be one-piece necks, and in some cases, one-piece or two-piece bodies. There's going to be things in place like that. However, what makes the guitar what it is the philosophy of the build style. This is where I want to take a second and just say this. The first real factory I ever went to was the PRS factory. I've now been to 36 since then. I was blown away with the employees at the PRS factory. And I was curious to see what I would see at the Cort SE factory.
That was Jacob, that guy. That's his idea.
They're blaming you. No, just kidding.
I'm saying your idea to the pictures.
Yeah, they're
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably
Yeah, they're proud. It's that good pride.
I really believe that everything works top down, especially as companies. You know, when you have a bad employee, a lot of times it's because you have a bad manager, which then translates to a bad owner above them. You infect everything top down. I was just really, really cool to see them be so similar to the US factory in a lot of ways. Now, there was some differences, but also you got to keep in mind it's a different country with a different culture and different laws. So there's just things that are different there. I wanted to approach this video this way differently because of the fact that it was the most unique experience I've had. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoy this video. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for your time. I want to thank PRS for helping making this happen. It's a fantastic experience, and I'm glad we got to share with you guys an inside look. And as always, know your gear.
That is not what I expected to
No,
see.
that is a well-engineered piece. And then look at the guitar. If you look at how it's set in there, these little ended wings are cut in, so when she pushes it down, all right, that bottoms out. Now, if you turn the guitar over, it's right at the right level.